Welcome to DMR, Dewey's Movie Reviews, the red carpet treatment. Enjoy the show.
All right. So welcome back to DMR. Thank you for tuning back in as always. Much obliged. So I hope you enjoyed that session from the FX Master, which was none other than Todd Tucker. If you haven't seen that one, go back and check that one out. Some awesome stories when it comes to Hollywood. So as the Legends of the Lens series continues, we've got another masterclass today, and it's with Steven Bernstein. So he has a lot of titles. He's a well-renowned cinematographer, director, screenwriter, author, and also a podcast host as well. He's been involved with a lot of cult classics when it comes to cinema. We've got Like Water for Chocolate that came out in 1992, which won the Best Artistic Contribution Award at the Tokyo International Film Festival. Bulletproof in 96 with Adam Sandler and Damon Wayans. Murder at 1600 in 97 with Wesley Snipes. We've also got Half Baked 98 with Dave Chappelle. The Waterboy again in 1998 with Adam Sandler. Scary Movie 2 that came out in 2001, the sequel. And of course we've got Monster in 2003 with Charlize Theron that won her the Oscar. So it's a brilliant hour. Buckle up. It's all about light, shadow, camera angles. We discuss drones and their involvement in cinema today. Also, the impact of streaming and what that's having on the industry versus going to the movies. You'll really enjoy this one. It's a massive deep dive. Here we go. Welcome back to DMR. Thank you for tuning back in as always. Much obliged. And tonight we've got a real treat. A world-renowned cinematographer, Mr. Steven Bernstein. Welcome, sir.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Delighted.
No, thank you. So you're calling in from Hollywood, is that right? 8 p.m. on a Friday night?
Yeah, it's 8 p.m. It's looking out right now. The Hollywood sign is literally right outside my window. Downtown Los Angeles is the other direction. I'm in the Hollywood Hills, just above Hollywood Boulevard and La Brea, which is the cross street where I live.
Wow, that's awesome. So, Looking on your Wikipedia, so you grew up you were born in New York, is that right?
I was born in upstate New York, a little industrial town called Buffalo near the Canadian border.
Okay.
And then ended up in the UK where I got most of my training at the BBC and then doing music videos and then independent films. And then back to the States about 25 years ago, yeah.
Wow. So how old were you when you went to the UK?
20-ish, something like that. Quite young, really, yeah.
And how long were you there for?
26 years.
Wow, long time. Long
Yeah.
time. And then you've come back to the States. What year did you come back?
Yeah, it was strange. The series of strange phenomena, coincidences. My first training was really the BBC, which was great, right out of uni, and was trained to be a writer and a director. Lots of time with actors, lots of time with senior BBC writers, learning about structure and order. Ended up doing a lot of theater stuff in the UK, writing theater shows, directing. But what was happening then in England was the music video phenomena. And someone, a guy named John Roseman, had developed this idea that rather than trying to find A&R men at the gig that you might be playing at as a band, wouldn't it be a great idea to shoot something on film? In those days, we do it on 16 millimeter film. And cut something together and then put it on the new videotape, Betamax or whatever it was, VHS.
Yep.
And put it on the desk of a A&R man who would then look at the video, not having to go to your gig, and then maybe sign you. And this was so popular with bands that in no time at all, we were shooting 4 or 5 of these a week. And then, of course, somebody had the idea that rather than just doing it against a green screen, which is what we did the first 4 or 5 against, that maybe we should take it out on location. So we took it on location, and maybe we should have actors, maybe we should have little stories, little narratives, things like I Don't Like Mondays, and then the stuff we did with the Eurythmics and stuff we did with Duran Duran and stuff we did with Paul McCartney, and it expanded and expanded and expanded. The budgets became bigger and bigger. And, I worked at the BBC, and they were very generous about letting me borrow equipment, particularly if I didn't tell them about it. And in no time at all, statute of limitations run out now, so I can say that. We were shooting, huge music videos, which became a phenomena, and then MTV then emerged in the US, and we were all making names for ourselves. What was interesting then was that people in commercials were looking for new and innovative ways of shooting things. They were looking at people doing music videos and saying, hey, we would never dream of shooting a commercial the way you guys shoot music videos. Why don't we bring in some of the DPs and the directors and designers for music videos, and you guys can do commercials? So then I began working with Tony Kaye and the Scotts and lots of other famous people, and started doing some really, we think, cutting-edge commercials, which went on to win the Cannes Golden Lion, the D&D Award, and so on. And that, of course, led to then people looking at these commercials and saying, interesting, the way you shoot commercials. We don't shoot features that way. We should take some of you radical innovators and bring you into feature films. And that led to my feature film career, doing things like, of course, Monster, which won the Oscar, and Like Water for Chocolate, which became the highest grossing foreign language film in America, and then White Chicks, which became a cult film, and Half Baked and all the rest of it. So that's kind of how I went from the UK through the BBC to music videos, commercials, then back to the States doing feature films.
Wow. What a kickoff. That's unbelievable. And that's right in the crux of, as you mentioned, like with MTV and whatnot in the 80s. That was, man, so I was born in 1985, so I kind of missed that whole era. I got a little bit of it on the back end in the early 90s with all the, waking up here in Australia. We've got, back in the day, still on the ABC, called Rage. And You'd basically sit there and you'd watch all the music videos, like early morning, like get up at 6 a.m. And it was just like a childhood, something you did every Saturday morning, basically. So
what was great about that whole era and period was that there were no mistakes. There were only like motifs. So when you're making a film, you're very often living in terror, because if you make a mistake, a day's shooting lost is £100,000, £200,000. It's a lot of money. Someone could walk off. Someone will be fired. Studios will be all over you if you make a mistake in a great hurry. With music videos, because the idea was that you really had a sense that you were doing something that was meant to be art, whether it was or not is debatable, but we thought it was, that you could innovate, and if something could be a radical departure from what people had done before, and rather than seeing that as dangerous or subversive, it was seen as imaginative and creative.
Yeah.
So we would do things like, I remember doing one music video for David Sylvian where we shot the entire thing intentionally out of focus.
Oh, wow.
With just these colors kind of blending together. And occasionally we'd roll focus in on a face or a mouth or a finger on a keyboard, but most of it was out of focus. First started the record company, they were shocked and horrified, then went on to win all these awards, and then everyone was shooting films or music videos out of focus. Not so much that being out of focus has a virtue, it's just the fact that you could do anything and try anything and discover new things that led to whole new ways and whole new understandings of filmmaking. You look at people like David Fincher, a lot of other people that came out of music videos. They have a very different approach to film and film narrative and to cinematography than people who came out of more conventional, straightforward feature backgrounds.
Got it. So you've touched on a little bit of a few of your career highlights with your movies and whatnot, and we'll get back to that. But I suppose rewinding the clock even further, like when you were a kid or a teenager or in your early 20s, like when was the moment, or I'll put it this way, you may have seen a film where you've gone, bang, I want to be a cinematographer, I want to get into the movies. What was that moment for you?
Great question. And two films at two different stages of my life. The first was Lawrence of Arabia, which for people who haven't seen a 70 millimeter print on a big screen, I did in Buffalo, that little industrial town, huge cinema. And they have, of course, on that film an overture before the film even begins, with these kettle drums pounding away and a spectacular score. And then the film with an intermission, that's how long the film was, just overwhelms you. Feel you're transported to a different world, and it's magical. I still remember the raid on Aqaba with the camels and horses sweeping across the desert, and the camera pulls back just before the intermission. Absolutely magical. And Peter O'Toole walking into the bar in in Cairo after they walked across the Negev, and has a glass of lemonade, and all the soldiers surround him and cheer. Magical moments, and I thought this is something that is different from my ordinary experience of life. It's life improved. It's life on steroids, if I know what a steroid was back then. It excites and it stimulates and it makes you feel that you're in another place. And the great thing about the fictive world is it has plasticity, that the ordinary world is laden with physical limitations. The fictive world is magical, and anything can happen there. And that film seemed quite magical to me. And then years later, when I was just starting university, I saw Days of Heaven, shot by the great Nestor Almendros, using all available light, what we call magic hour. They would shoot the film only in the early morning and late afternoon when the sun was just beneath the horizon. So you'd have a very warm color temperature. We measure color in a thing called color temperature. You heat a black mass and it reaches different colors as it heats. That color corresponds to a number, which we call color temperature. So when it's very red, it's a low color temperature, like 3,000 degrees. When it's very blue, it's like 7,000 degrees. So everything Nestor did on that film was in the low, warm register, because the sun, when it's very low in the sky, is very warm. And when there's no direct sunlight, you have no shadow. You just have this warm glow illuminating things from different sides. It's called magic hour. And the film was stunning, of course, won the Oscar for Best Cinematography. And again, like with Lawrence of Arabia, it transports you. You just feel that you're in this magical, in this case, beautiful world that you want to be in. I would still contend that there's a shot early in that movie when a train, steam train, goes across a railway trestle, and it's all backlit, and there's no fill light, no foreground light at all, just this enormous train on this enormous trestle in silhouette with the music playing. And I would contend that's the most beautiful shot in the history of cinema. And if you're not moved by that, you're not moved by anything. Maybe the birth of your child, but few other things will move you quite as powerful as that. And then I said, okay, not only do I want to get in film, but I want to be a cinematographer, because there's something that is viscerally emotive. I mean, lots of things can be emotive. Lots of things can make us feel. Poetry can make us feel. Words can make us feel. Relationships can make us feel. But that world of the visceral, where you can look at something and you get a feeling in your gut, is almost entirely and uniquely the purview of painting and of cinematography. And I thought that film was quite special and inspired the next 30 years of my career.
There you go. What a great answer. So, to sum it all up with the cinematographers, like, it's a broad kind of role in the movie game. So it has to do with lighting, lenses, the crew as well. Just sum it up for people, that the audience that may know a little bit about cinematography but don't really know the full role of what a cinematographer does. And I know that you do have other titles like director, screenwriter, and author as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, I've got a novel that came out last year that won the American Writers Award, and I've
Awesome.
directed a lot of films, and now writing a TV series. So yeah, I've moved on to other things, but I think a better description of cinematographer is director of photography. I think it gives a better understanding. And it goes to what I was saying before about the visceral nature of Days of Heaven and other films. A director might be focused on performance and on the storytelling. Cinematographer is focused more on the illustration of those feelings. So you might want the audience to feel something. So that trestle shot I described, nothing to do with storytelling, is just a shot. But when you put that shot up on the screen, the audience feels something. That feeling is one of the responsibilities of a cinematographer. How can you make an audience feel just by creating an image? Get something like in Apocalypse Now, when Brando is deep in shadow at the end of the film. He's a terrifying but troubled figure, and part of that is the great performance by Brando, but part of that is also the cinematography. By keeping him in deep shadow and having that cold blue light and the backlight separating him, it emphasizes and amplifies the feeling that the performer is creating through the performance. Another thing a cinematographer does. And then, of course, there is also the storytelling elements, that we don't experience the world the way we experience a movie. We don't have in our lives a sudden close-up at a key moment when our boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife says something to us. We don't suddenly see them in a close-up with the camera pushing in. But that's the way film works, is that we've got to select what we put on camera. So, for example, if at some key moment you want the audience to emphasize and focus on a line of a character, we might slowly push the camera forward into that character's face as they're speaking, and it creates a unconscious response in the audience that this is a moment of significance. That's another thing a cinematographer is encoding these ideas to an audience to make them feel or think particular things. Or if it's an action sequence in a film like The Bourne Identity, we'll put the camera on a shoulder, we'll put it on a long lens, will shake more because it's amplifying the images more, it's magnifying them more, and then we'll swing the camera backwards and forwards and up and down very, very quickly. And what happens then is when an audience can't see something clearly, when it's moving very quickly, when information's coming to them faster than they can process it, it elicits the fight or flight response, and a chemical response of cortisol and adrenaline and lots of other chemicals in the body, which excites the viewer or the audience. So if we want the audience to be excited, we'll use a handheld shot, we'll move the camera around a lot, we'll bounce it up and down, we'll do swish pans where the camera moves quickly from side to side. And anyone looking at that then feels on edge, they feel nervous, they feel stressed. It's another thing a cinematographer will do. So our job then is to provide the visual narrative and encoding and stimulus that accompanies the narrative storytelling that the actors and the director will be doing.
Great summary. Great summary. See, myself, as like in relation to cinematography, I wouldn't have known that. I'm a movie buff, right? I've been a movie buff since I was a kid, but knowing that now, that it really captures all the emotion, it really sums it up for me, knowing of moving forward, if that makes sense. So, it was the mid 80s, I think it was, 1986. Was it Smart Alec? Was that the film that you were involved with?
Yeah, I know that appears on my resume somewhere. Either I was so addled with drugs or so young. I don't know if that really was my first film. I may have come in on a second unit on that. I think the first film, first feature film I did was shortly thereafter. I think it was a thriller in the UK, a very, very low budget thriller. Okay. I remember how low budget it was because I think our crew was 12 people for the entire film. And wow. When I did SWAT, my action unit had about 230 people just on that unit. So I've experienced the extremes of the industry, both big and small.
There you go. So as I mentioned before, 1985, baby, so I came up in the VHS era. So whilst I didn't go and see premieres and stuff like that, the movies, my local video shop was the go-to on the Saturday afternoon of the rentals, of the weekly rentals for $1. So it's unfortunately, as we know, the video store is now extinct. But some of the films I'm very familiar with that you've done, some I'm not. So the one that you mentioned before, Like Water for Chocolate, in 92. So tell me, and the viewers as well, a little bit about that movie, how you're involved, and what became
it was an interesting movie. Alfonso Aro, a Mexican director. Very often what happens is that cinematographers don't compete with each other. We consider each other fellow artists, so we support each other, which is each other's career, and we're also interested experimentally in what we're doing creatively. We look at other people's work, we study it, we ring someone up. I'm a member of what's called the ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers, which is a kind of exclusive group of high-end cinematographers, but it's really a club, and we actually have a clubhouse here that's been there for 130 years. And cool. We gather there, and we talk, and we exchange ideas about how we shot things, and we help each other. My dear friend Gabriel Bernstein, who went on to shoot a lot of the Marvel movies like Black Widow and so on, was from Mexico and got a call from Alfonso Aro and said, look, I'm shooting a film. We've lost our cinematographer. That's another interesting story, who that cinematographer was. We need someone to come and finish the film in Mexico. And I was in the UK, and Gabby was in the UK at the time as well. And he said, look, I can't do this film, but do you want to go do it? It'll only take a week or two of your career. And I said, sure. And of course, 6 months later, I was still there shooting because we had all sorts of problems and challenges. Kept running out of money. We couldn't afford to get the film processed. An actor quit. Lots of adventures, crazy adventures with scorpions and tarantula spiders and houses burning down. And it was a movie that I was sure would never get released. Well, not only did it get released, but it became a phenomena in the world, particularly in the U.S. So the highest grossing foreign language film of all time at the time.
Wow.
And launched a lot of careers, including my own. Right after that, I got the call from some big studios in Hollywood saying, "We just saw Like Water for Chocolate, stunning. Will you come out? You and the other cinematographer, you must be real geniuses." I don't know if either one of us were geniuses, but we both built careers on it. The other cinematographer is a guy named Emmanuel Lubezki, also known as Chivo, who went on to get, I believe, 6 consecutive Oscar nominations, and became one of the biggest and most successful cinematographers in the world. That was his first movie right out of film school, and he had left the movie because of a dispute with the director, and then was trying to get his career going when I came in, finished it, and the phenomena began. So it was a very interesting period. And then I arrived in Hollywood, and everyone wanted to meet me. The way Hollywood works is you're the belle of the ball for about a week, right after you've had a film that comes out. And I had a film that was the biggest film in America at the time, and met everybody. And then that led to a lot of other film offers, some of which I shouldn't have taken, some of which I did. Made some good films and lots of bad ones too.
Well, that's all right. You got to have a crack, right? So you've got a massive blend of different films, from comedies to action. And one of the ones I believe you're involved with was Bulletproof. Is that right? With Adam Sandler?
Yeah.
And
Adam Sandler and Damon Wayans. Yeah.
Damon Wayans, yeah. So just so you know, in Australia here, like obviously you guys spawned cable TV, right? So it only arrived here in Australia in about the mid-90s. 96, 97 is when it came in. And whilst I didn't see Bulletproof at the cinema, I did catch it originally on streaming. And I used to watch it over and over and over again. It was such a crack-up, like, comedy slash... And it was very unique as well. It was such a unique story of the undercover cop that basically gets killed, almost, to a degree, by the guy that he's pretending to be mates with, and then has to deal with him thereafter with a plate in his head. It was a brilliant film. So...
We had a lot of great action. Again, going to how the film began was the director of that was Ernest Dickerson, who was a former cinematographer and was Spike Lee's cinematographer. So he invited me in and we began talking about cinematography and painting, and then he asked me to do it. And that led to me meeting both Adam Sandler, who became a big part of my career, because I went on to shoot Waterboy with Adam, which made $1 billion at the box office. So made a big difference in my career. And then Damon Wayans, who introduced me to the Wayans family, and that led to, I think, 5 films with them, including White Chicks, Little Man, and Scary Movie 2, and a host of others. So a key point in my career. And, of course, that was my first studio film, my first big American studio film. And that led to lots of other studio films, particularly big action films. At the time, there was a film that was popular in the cinemas called Bad Boys.
Yep.
And this was meant to be Universal's answer to Bad Boys, and it was a combination of huge action sequences. They gave us a limitless budget to shoot everywhere we wanted to, and comedy. Of course, Sandler had just come off Saturday Night Live, which was a big American TV show, and it was one of his first movies, and this was Brent building his career. And Damon, of course, also becoming very big at the time. He did a couple of films, but then In Living Color became a big American phenomenon. And then he did a thing called My Wife and Kids, which became another big phenomenon, went on to lots of other things. So it was a key point in a lot of different people's careers. Again, I got very lucky to be there at that time doing that movie.
So with Bulletproof, looking back at it now, the lighting on that movie stands out for me. It looks very, very sharp and very, very crisp. Like even the shots at night, especially when they're driving around, I think it's LA or something like that, and he has the famous Disneyland, the line that he does there. So talk to me about the lighting on that, or that aspect of it, like for Bulletproof, because it's a sharp looking movie.
Well, thank you. A lot of that came from my cinematography on music videos. First of all, we're using a big negative. We shot that widescreen anamorphic. So whenever you shoot, the bigger your negative, the sharper the image is going to be. And I'm a great believer in having a sharp image that you then knock down and deteriorate with filters and soft lighting and different things. But start with a sharp image and then play with it in other ways. The other thing that I was pioneering then was a technique I had developed on music videos, which is don't light from above, where most films are lit, or from the side, where most films are lit. I was fascinated with lighting that came from below.
Okay.
Because I had looked at the paintings of Renoir in particular, and I looked at theater lighting, and I was just fascinated how iridescent subjects seemed to be when the key light, which is our main light, comes from below. So I wouldn't use all my lighting from there, but almost every single person I lit then and for the next 30 years, my key light would come from below the subject, which would make them appear to iridesce, which you're calling that sharpness, that interior glow they would seem to have. And then I would supplement it with some backlight and some additional fill light. As you see right now, the lighting on me is relatively flat. If I was to take this light and put it below me, you would see that it's a very different effect on my face.
Yes.
And this is a little bit stronger than I would normally use, but you can see the quality of my features changes dramatically when I underlight it. If that was a slightly softer source, wasn't so obvious, it makes a very compelling image. And by the time I was doing films like Noah Baumbach's movies, Mr. Jealousy, and SWAT, another big action film, and then Murder 1600 with Wesley Snipes, tons of underlight. I would take entire floors and I would cut trenches in the floors and put diffusion in the floor and then light from the floor with additional lighting around the set. It was unlike what anybody else was doing, but it gave us a very unique and iridescent, as you say, kind of sharp and unique, appealing image that was more painterly and more Renoir-like and less like a traditional Hollywood film.
There you go. That's awesome, especially the trenches. Like that's amazing. And is that how long?
We would do all sorts of remarkable things. We would hide lights in tables. We'd cut holes in bars in restaurants and things. Always that lighting coming from below, that soft underlighting, which became kind of my trademark.
There you go. So as I mentioned before the show, like I'm a drone operator, and humpback whale season is about to kick off here in Australia. We've got a couple that have come up the coast already, but it's around about early June in the bulk of it when they come up, and then late October to November is when they come back down the coast with their calves and they start doing all their tricks and breaches and all that. Now, I've been doing that for 3 years, and lighting is such an important thing, and I've experimented with all different types of exposure. So I've shot humpback whales on very dark exposure and then coming back and editing it on Adobe Premiere. You light it up and it gets a totally different image that you didn't expect to get when the exposure was so dark, and vice versa. Sometimes I've been out there and the exposure has been too great and the whale does one of its tricks or jumps out of the water, and you come back home and you realize that you've stuffed up because the exposure is way too harsh. Do you know what I mean? So again, as I said before the show kicked off, this is a bit of a masterclass for myself as well, especially with light and how you've mentioned. So I don't think a lot of people realize the importance of lighting and how you can play around with it in film.
Yeah. And, the thing about every camera, even digital cameras, they have a limited range ultimately of what they can tolerate. If you get overexposed, the image halates, it becomes just a white mass. And if it's underexposed, you tend to get noise or grain. So if you underexpose your image, you might still get an image that's as recognizable as what your subject is. But when you print it up, as we say, to make it look neutral or correctly exposed, you add a lot of noise because you're not starting with the original quality image that you're pulling things up that no longer exist. You've crushed a lot of the pixels that can't really be restored. Same thing with overexposure, that the pixels kind of blend together. And once they're overexposed, then you can't restore them really. I mean, there are techniques in post-production now, but for the most part, it's not a good idea. So when you're doing something like what you're doing, you try to go for the most neutral mid-exposure that you can. There's different tricks you can use. Like if you put a net or a filter over your lens, it tends to build up the black area, the shadow areas, so they're not so dense. And by building up your shadow areas and then reducing your exposure, you're pulling your top end down and you're bringing your bottom end up, so you don't get any crushing, you don't get any overexposure. That's one technique a lot of people use. It's called a low contrast or a soft contrast filter. You put it on, and then you reduce your exposure, pulling your top end and you're building your bottom end up as best you can. On films, when we're shooting things and harder with whales, we tend to use fill light. We bring lights in and we just fill the subject in so that our shadows don't become too dense. So if our shadows become too dense, again, they tend to crush and we print up. You see this very often on digital stuff on your television. You notice that some of the blacks look, the strange colors start to appear in them. That's because it's underexposed. That's why we tend to expose everything on a photographic image, and then we'll print down. But as long as we can maintain that original integrity, it doesn't matter if we print down, we won't get that color shift that happens when you just pure underexpose. You don't light it. So those are some of the things that you can do. And then with digital cameras, you can also adjust the contrast on them. So contrast is just how deep your blacks are and how bright your whites are. If you go inside your camera and flatten your contrast out, so no black is too dark and no highlight is too bright, then it doesn't matter what you photograph, it'll never be really overexposed or underexposed because you're just getting a flat response curve. Normally a curve looks like this, 45 degrees. As the light changes, there's a corresponding change in the density of the image. Whereas if you flatten the camera out, doesn't matter how much your exposure goes up and down, you'll get the same quality of image. So it's another trick you can use for doing the sort of thing you're doing is just flatten out the curve of the camera so that you never get overexposure or underexposure. But it sounds like what you're doing is singular and remarkable. And going back to the thing I was saying about emotive, I don't think anyone can be photographing huge groups of whales with spawn coming up a coast without it being an emotive image. It must be very beautiful.
Yeah, look, the first time I filmed one was, about June 2023. And it was the closest thing to witnessing something like Jurassic Park. Because I grew up with that movie. I saw it early 1994, changed cinematic history and my love of movies forever. But seeing something that big, like 40 tons, especially with their offspring as well, it's just nuts. It's just insane. And a lot of people get to experience that this time of year because the migration is just about to kick off. But it's such a cool thing. But staying on the drones. So have you used drones in your films, or are you using drones at the moment? Like, talk me through that technology, because it's only like through the normal public. Like, you've got brands like DJI and whatnot. It's probably only been about the last like 5 to 10 years where a lot of people in the public eye or whatnot can go out and purchase one. But how long have drones been in film?
I was one of the first to use a drone. I did a film with John Malkovich and Risa Fons called Dominion, or Last Call, about the last days of Dylan Thomas. And we shot the opening of the movie with, I think, one of the first commercially operated drone cameras. And it was a revelation to me. At those times, you couldn't put drones up for very long. I think the longest flight time would be like 4 minutes or 5 minutes. And the stability was difficult. And then the image quality, because it couldn't lift a very heavy camera. And we tend to use cameras with bigger chips and greater weight than most drones at the time would tolerate. Now, of course, on feature sets in Los Angeles, we're sending up full-sized chip cameras that are very, very heavy with big drones, and we're getting some stability. The other big issue was the helicopters, which is what we'd used before, mainly a thing called the Tyler helicopter mount and other stabilization mounts. Whether, despite the complexity of those, whether they were more stable than drones. In the early days, that the helicopter mounts were more stable because they used tuning fork stabilization and they used steady cams, and they could be connected to a special double propeller helicopter, which was more stable. And even though it was very expensive to use and very difficult, the stability was better than on the drone. Now, more recently, on action stuff and commercials that we use, the drones have gotten so very good now that it simply isn't worth the hassle of getting a special helicopter rig with a camera operator and a pilot and the cost and the insurance and filing the flight plan and getting the approval. It just doesn't make sense anymore to use anything but drones. And it's kind of revolutionized the way films are made now, because those shots, which are very often your big establishing shots, your big production value shots, would be featured in your movie, and you spend lots of money to have on them. No longer the case. It's much easier now with drones. So I use them all the time. Everybody out here does. They're very, very popular.
Could you imagine the drones, like if they had been back in the 80s? Like I could imagine, like when you first flew your own drone, it would have been like a massive like cheat code for a cinematographer, like compared to what you were used to.
Yeah, and with little cameras with small chips. So you would shoot it, you look at it initially and on the monitor, wow, that was great. And then you put it on the big screen, you go, oh, man, it's a a little bit grainy, or there's not enough latitude, or it's not quite working. So in the early days, like so much technology, you didn't think it was going to make a difference. And then, of course, it did. But I saw the same thing with the shift from upright moviolas and Steenbeck editing machines to digital editing, which happened like overnight. And then, of course, on the camera side, I was still shooting features on 35 millimeter film with the movie cam, with the Panavision cameras, and these were big cameras with 35 millimeter film. And there were 4 major labs in Los Angeles, and there were 3 major labs in London, and this was the way it was and where it was all going to be. And then in about 4 years, virtually every film outlet stopped. The labs shut down. There's only one lab left, I think, in North America that processes motion picture film. I think there's maybe one lab in the UK, maybe one in France. And motion picture cameras, which one time were very expensive and rare and difficult to ever contemplate owning, now people sell them for virtually nothing as antiques or something you could decorate your apartment with. So technology comes, things change very quickly, and then as an artist and a technician, you have to decide whether you're going to fight it or roll with it. I mean, generally, the best advice is roll with it, learn the new technology, adapt it, integrate it, and use it as a tool. Don't see it as an enemy. Of course, now the big challenge is AI, and it's hitting in a very, very big way. Not writing so much, which is my principal occupation now, because it can't write for whatever reason. There's something in our humanity, maybe the imperfection of our humanity, that people find appealing, and maybe AI is too good or too prosaic of a writer for it to work. But for animation, for background, for changing, say, the color of a costume, or to have some extras falling off a cliff in the background of something, like we're doing on a TV show that I'm working on right now, AI looks like they're right at the cutting edge of being able to do this. And it's going to change the way films are made. It's going to change the way films are budgeted, how quickly they can shoot, and then who's making the films, because you're not going to be quite as reliant on technicians as you were before. It's not to say that AI can do everything, or that just because it can do it doesn't mean we should do it, but it's changing the landscape.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I use AI with my own normal day job, and obviously with all stuff personally as well. It's a very handy tool. But just on the whole technology thing as well, like getting back to stuff like streaming and where that's headed in this day and age. So like, the old case of Blockbuster Video, that they had that opportunity to, I think, to buy Netflix originally, and they passed up on it, and then Netflix exploded, and then the death of the video shop, or took place. So, what, as a cinematographer, what do you feel how streaming is going to affect, like, going to the movies, going to the cinema? Because I've noticed it here. Sorry, go.
Yeah, it has already, and now it's about to have the after effect, because streaming is now kind of dying. Initially, Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and all the other big streaming services were offering so much for so little that they pretty much put independent film out of business.
Yeah.
Certainly in America and large parts of Europe, not so much the UK, but parts of it, people would stop going to the cinema and would prefer watching the films at home, or so they would have us believe. The problem with the model is that it wasn't a profitable one. So Netflix was making films, distributing films, showing films, but it wasn't making enough money to sustain the model. But meanwhile, they had put all the models that did make money out of business. Then about 2 years ago, when my guild, the Writers Guild, was on strike, and then the Actors Guild was on strike, and the Technicians Guild was on strike with the studios said, all right, well, we'll pay you all what you want. But then they came back and they said, well, we're not going to make films for a while. They didn't say this publicly, but it became self-evident that they had stopped making movies. And then people in Hollywood and then the other big production centers were simply starving, because the streamers had killed the industry, and now the streamers had stopped making movies. And there was no other show to go to or to play on, because they had taken over the marketplace. And then, of course, the model changed again, and then the streamers did what the studio said they would always be doing, because they had anticipated the failure of the streamers, and they were going to start charging on pay-per-view for the films rather than offering them free on Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and all the rest. And now, inch by inch, day by day, moment by moment, all around the world, the streaming model as we knew it, which is free movies for your subscription, has died. And now every time you want to watch a film or TV show, within a few years, you're going to be paying for it.
Yeah.
Very much like the news sites on the internet and virtually everything else. Paywalls are going to be everywhere, and it's going to be on a film by film or series by series pay basis. So people are going to be paying a lot of money like they used to when they went to the cinema. The other phenomena, of course, with Project Hail Mary here in the US, and now Devil Wears Prada 2, and then a few years ago with Barbie and then Oppenheimer, is the studio is, I don't know why, but they've been sort of shocked to discover there's a huge appetite for people to go to cinema. And that is something that people regret losing. So two things are happening. The model of streamers for free is dying, so you're going to have to pay, which is going to make it less attractive to people. And people want to go out and see Ryan Gosling and a little bit of Rock acting together on the big screen and are going out. I think the film has made $1 billion, just about to make $1 billion now. I think it's coming up to that. And people want to go out and see it. So it's interesting, but the model is changing and going back to where we were before, which means that the quality of the image, because you can judge the quality of the image on a big screen, you can't judge on your own screen, is going to matter again. So again, what format we shoot on, Christopher Nolan and others are still shooting on film, and film still looks better. It's much more difficult to work with, I hasten to add, but it still looks better than digital does. And if you're going to shoot on a big screen, you're going to have big chips, and you're going to have to, and AI is going to have to produce something of very, very high quality in terms of resolution, which it can't always do at speed because it requires so much bandwidth. So it's changing again, and will change again in the future. But I think the latest change is going to be a return to cinema and abandonment to a large degree of the streaming models. The other problem with streaming models is that the audience that traditionally would watch streamers aren't interested in watching full movies. So in America, at least, YouTube and TikTok are getting much higher viewing numbers than streamers are. So people are watching things in 2 or 4 minute segments. And I don't know if it's happened in Australia, probably has. This thing called vertical is the big phenomenon now in America and the UK, where rather than watching something on a wide screen, like the screen that you and I are on right now, people are watching things on the screen like TikTok and Instagram offers, which is a screen that is virtually the same height as it is wide. So they call it vertical rather than horizontal entertainment. And these programs they're making tend to be 2 to 3 minutes long, produced generally by amateurs or people without much film experience with non-professional actors, very often little soap operas or dramas that cost nothing to make and then are put on TikTok and sold and monetized, but in the billions of dollars. So the studios in America have seen this, and now they're all building their own vertical divisions where they will produce these little 2 minute segments to be put on TikTok and YouTube and on Instagram to compete with their own streaming models.
Very interesting, because I'm on both. I'm obviously on TikTok and on YouTube as well, and I love both formats, obviously long form and short form, but definitely over on TikTok, it's the attention span. You've basically got, well, I think it's anywhere between 3 seconds and 10 seconds to get the hook and get the audience to basically stay for the whole video. So it's such a, like, the time frame on that forum, it's just very, very short. So whatever it is that you're producing on there, you've got to hook them in very, very quickly.
No question. And that's what they're doing right now. And I mean, for the studios, it's a very attractive model because it costs virtually nothing to make those things. And if somebody goes viral, so they're having with a small investment, it's a big profit for the studio.
Yeah, 100%. It's actually really good news that you're telling me this from Hollywood about getting back into the cinema, people going back in the cinema and paying that ticket stub. Because, again, that was a massive part of my childhood, going to the cinema foyer, seeing the massive cardboard cutouts, all the popcorn, all the smells and all that. That was ingrained in my memory. Now, I don't go out to premieres and whatnot because I'm a dad at the moment and I've got 2 boys, so it's very hectic to get to Friday, Thursday night premieres, but I still catch movies when I review them on like Sunday afternoons. But you go in there and the cinema at the moment, especially here in Australia, it's only about 20% full most of the time. And I'm looking around and I'm going, how long have we got? But from what you're telling me now, it's actually very good news for people.
Come back. Ryan Gosling may have saved our world because Project Hail Mary is making so much money. And The Devil Wears Prada 2, which comes out in a week, is already projected, at least at my studio, to be making nearly as much money as Project Hail Mary will be. So two films that are probably going to both make over $1 billion in a period of a month is good news for cinema, and both opening with traditional theatrical releases. And there's a big
100%.
animated film, which is also a theatrical release, which also did very well. I think it was made 300 or 400 million in there as well. So it's right now it's a good time for cinema, and they're making people re-examine things. And the fact that streamers are not offering films for free anymore means that even though it's not a lot of money, people are kind of reluctant to spend $20 to watch a film on their home screen. Thinking, if I'm going to spend $20, I might as well go out and enjoy the evening, as you rightly say, have some popcorn and be around people. And the greatest pleasure of all is watching a film with other people, hearing them laugh and cry and be shocked and horrified. It's just more fun to see a film with people.
Big time, big time. And I'm conscious of your time because it's Friday night over there. But in the mid-90s, you had a couple of really good films, which was Murder at 1600, Half-Baked, and The Waterboy. So just, you mentioned the takings of the Waterboy with Sandler. How much was it again?
Over $1 billion.
Wow, man, that's incredible, incredible.
And they didn't think it was going to make a lot of money. I remember they were hoping for an opening of around $15,000 or $20,000. We broke the box office record for a comedy, and then we broke the second week and the third week and the fourth week, and just went on and on. It was a phenomenon. Really launched. Adam was one of the sweetest, nicest men, so it couldn't happen to a better person. But it was, considered lowbrow. Same phenomenon I had later with White Chicks, where everyone told me what a lowbrow film it was and not meant for sophisticated audiences. And again, to this day, whenever I speak at a college campus or when I lecture somewhere or show my other films, the first question always is about White Chick, which is an international phenomenon. Or Half-Baked, again, you mentioned that. Only stoners were interested in that film, and it had a quiet original life, didn't do very well at the box office initially, and then has become a cult film. What's interesting is they have, in American universities, they have cult film nights for different types of movies. And I'm on all these different circuits because the stoners, their ultimate cult film is Half-Baked.
Yep.
For people who like the Wayans type comedies, I got Scary Movie 2, Little Man, and White Chicks, and that's on another circuit. Sandler's got a huge following. That's on another circuit. And for the art films, I've got Monster with Charlize Theron, which, of course, won the Oscar, and that's become a huge phenomenon. So I'm always getting invited to campuses to talk about that. And like Water for Chocolate, because it was in the Spanish language, that's got a little subsect as well. So for some reason, I'd love to say it was my good decision-making. I just got lucky. I just kept locking into films that ended up with cult followings for the particular style of film.
Yeah. So I'll talk about Monster in a second because I rewatched that recently. But back to Scary Movie 2. So you were the cinematographer for that.
Yeah.
So
I was.
So you with I haven't seen it in a while, but we watched the first one the other night, and we were pissing ourselves laughing, my wife and I. It was hilarious. But the second one is in the mansion, right, with My Strong Hand, the butler. And then they took the basketball scene where, so you shot that?
I did.
Oh, man. I remember when I first saw that, in tears, Stephen, in absolute tears. I've got to, so that was a rip-off, or basically a take on the NBA original ad. Is that, they call it a spoof,
Correct.
Right? Spoof comedy, right? So, and it was all. How did you shoot that? Just run that by me, that shot, because I want to. I'm just thinking.
Well, it was simple. We just there was a little bit of visual effects. The basketball was a green screen.
Yeah.
But everything else was just changing the camera speed so that the ball would bounce faster than it would.
Yeah.
And then with the green screen, we had a lot of doubles of professional basketball players who were doing some of the dribbling and stuff. And then because the ball was on a green screen, we could move it where we wanted to, and that created the effect. It was all black set. So that was fun. We parodied a lot of things. The biggest moment people overlook was we did a satire of The Exorcist in the middle of that.
Yep.
And the original actor we had playing the priest was Marlon Brando.
Really?
Marlon Brando we had for 2 days, and Natasha Lyonne played the girl. And then Marlon got called away to another film, having taken his millions that they paid him. And we brought James Wood in.
Yep.
And I did a shot-by-shot recreation, including the same lighting exposure, the same lenses, the same camera. I got everything that I could from the Friedkin Exorcist, and I replicated it exactly. I mean, same focal length, same lighting style, everything. So when you look at that film, you're looking at The Exorcist, but on a higher quality motion picture film because their equipment was more primitive, but with all the comic effects that you'd want, including the projectile vomiting that everyone did in that scene.
Yep.
And the great thing about the weigh-ins is we did the first take, and a lot of projectile vomiting was huge. And then Keenan, as was his wont, would say, "Yeah, that was funny, but let's make it bigger." And so then we got even bigger tubes and more false vomit, and our projectile vomiting became even bigger, and it became funny. I got to say, I've been very blessed in that these sets that I work on, from the weigh-ins to Adam Sandler to Half Baked with Dave Chappelle, a lot of laughing. So even though we're concerned about the quality and we want to make the best thing we can, it's even more fun when you're laughing from the moment you arrive at work to the time you go home.
That would be hard to keep a straight face when you're dealing with such huge comedic talent like on set. It'd just be nuts. It'd be so cool.
Yeah, no, we had a lot of fun. And the great thing is, it started so many careers. Some of these people were minor players like Chappelle and others, and then went on to huge careers as comedians or actors in other movies. You look at Half Baked, and you look who's in that film: Jon Stewart, who became a big star in American television; Sarah Silverman, Willie Nelson, Snoop Dogg. Everybody was in Half Baked. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I've got to go back and watch it. I've only seen it a couple of times, but I remember it's a cracker. So the last film we'll talk about is Monster. So with Charlize Theron, she won Best Oscar. Is that right? Oscar.
She won the Oscar for Best Actress. Absolutely. Yep.
So yeah, I watched it again the other week, and I'd seen it once or twice before a while ago, and it's a brilliant film, but it's a hard hitting, gritty story, and there's a couple of shots in it that I want to talk to you about. One of them is when she goes and pretends that she's a normal working class person and goes in for a job. Now, that scene stuck out to me because she's basically sitting there, and obviously with the face makeup and whatnot, she's saying, she's got no experience, but she's a hard worker, this and that. And then I remember the guy that was interviewing saying, "Hey, you don't get to do this, basically. You don't get to come here when you want, well, I've been studying for, 10 years, whatever it is. I'm a lawyer, this and that. And who are you to come here and think you can just walk right in?" Like, run me through a few of those scenes. There's that scene that stuck out to me, and then there's the final scene where she picks up the guy on the highway and he's trying to help her. And that was heavy hitting because you can see it in her face that she doesn't really want to do it, but she has to because he knows what she looks like. So run me through both of those scenes, because one's she's trying to be quite positive and get her life back on track. The other is basically the other end of the spectrum where she needs to get rid of this guy. So run me through that.
What was great was the director, Pat Jenkins, who went on to direct Wonder Woman and dear friend, had just come out of the American Film Institute Film School, so very inexperienced, but had written a brilliant script, had gotten Charlize to sign on, and they're going to make this film. And it starts with Patty's preternatural understanding of what the film was that she was making, which was not a horror film or a slasher film, but a love story. And to Patty, even though this was about a serial killer, it was about a human being, and all human beings deserve some level of our sympathy. We can object to the crime while still recognize a person's humanity. And that informed every single scene that we did. Photographically, what I did was I desaturated the colors. I used heavy filtration. I used soft lighting. I intentionally underexposed the film and printed up everything that would make the film grainier and the colors less vivid.
Yep.
So you'd have that sense of decay everywhere, because the film is about moral decay before it's about anything else. And then for those scenes that you cited, the pathos of them, it goes to how we not only portrayed it in the performance, but how we photographed it. Because if you remember The Office, we emphasize its blandness and its flatness and its ordinariness and its lack of color. And there's something about color that makes the world seem safer and more sympathetic. When you live in a world of black and whites or denatured colors or pastels, the world seems a less kind place. That's one of the things that we did. We also used very wide-angle lenses, to cause a sense of distortion, discomfort, like a funhouse mirror almost, but just an unpleasantness. And then we would shoot him in such a way with slightly low angle to make him appear omnipotent and more aggressive. And then we shot down on her to make her feel more vulnerable, even though we knew her to be a killer. So for all those reasons, we sensed the humanity of her and her pathos at that moment of actual need. The murder scene, different again. That was a night where we generated a lot of fog because now we're trying to get into the emblematic nature of her journey. And both Patty and I wanted that sequence to be dreamlike. So even though it was a murder, we wanted to be a murder that seemed otherworldly, that had more to do with her interior life than it had to do with the physical act of murder. That now she was living literally, physically, specifically, this nightmare where the world no longer seemed to have a physical handle that you could hold. And she was in this dream, this waking dream of a thick fog bank and darkness and this individual tragedy where she was compelled to kill someone, but now she was killing not someone who had done her an injury, but someone who had shown her a real kindness. So she was at that point morally lost, and we had to create the landscape that reflect her inner turmoil. And for that, we had some huge fog machines we brought in and made it very, very foggy and very, very dark. And then by some almost divine coincidence, it was a very humid night in Florida. The temperature dropped, and in the middle of all this fog that we were desperately trying to generate, a real fog rolled in to the point that we could barely see past camera, and we shot the sequence in that.
Wow.
And I just had to get enough exposure on her and all that fog so she could be seen. And then we have a hitchhiking scene of her hitchhiking in this fog right after that, which was compelling and powerful. You know, the thing about cinematography, the thing about directing, the thing about all these things is that there's so many different ways you can communicate to an audience. You can communicate with an audience with a script, what a character says. You can communicate with a composition by putting something and making it asymmetrical between one side of the frame or another side of the frame. Very often in Monster, we put someone way on the edge of the frame to make them seem vulnerable and in danger. You can do a high angle, make someone seem vulnerable, a low angle, make them seem powerful. You can push a camera in slowly to emphasize a point. There's a moment when Charlize is saying goodbye to Christina Ricci, and you see this real affection between them. And as they're hugging each other to say goodbye, we slowly push the camera in closer and closer and closer. And there's nothing being said between them, just the camera pushing in. But that camera pushing in created that emotional emphasis that was enough to make audiences sobbing in the cinema when it was shown. So all these mechanisms, some from cinematographers, some from production design. Editors can edit a thing very quickly or more slowly, can hold on a shot for a long time or cut between close-ups very, very rapidly. We can introduce music. All these things that I'm mentioning are different types of codes. Okay. Secret codes, quiet codes, codes that don't speak clearly but subtly, and they engage the audience emotionally, intellectually, and it make them feel things that we want to make them feel. And on a film like Monster, we employed them all to make the audience feel what we want them to feel. We do the same thing in comedy, but then everything's in the service of making people laugh. It's recognizing that film isn't one language, which is spoken. It's probably 20 different languages, all integrated in different ways, all of which as filmmakers we have to master to become the most effective filmmakers that we can possibly be. Now that I direct, I'm more concerned with how my performers act, or in my writing, because that's my main occupation. People hire me as a screenwriter, how the words I select and the cadence of those words and the vernacular and the specific references I make, how those will influence the audience's understanding of action and of character. So it's another language that I'm employing, no longer the one of cinematography, but it's still a language and still one that I have to employ to make my films effective for audiences.
There you go. Now, yeah, and just on Monster as well, the way you shot that, it's that obviously the life that she had before when she meets Christina Ricci, it's almost like that whole relationship, it's a dangle of the carrot that you've captured extremely well for that person, because it's a glimpse of a life that she could just kind of reach. She had it for a little bit, but her past catches up with her, and then she turns into the person that she does and is taken away from her. And that's that desperation, that almost that reach that you've done very well with, and it's like, oh, I've lost it.
Yeah,
That's
no,
what I felt.
it's what we desire is and what we achieve are two different things. And the tragedy of that film is that she wants to be a
Yeah.
person who's loved and is loving, but of course makes choices that are immutable, and there's no turning back from that. And that's the beauty and the tragedy of that particular movie.
No, it's a great film. Very good. So, Stephen, just before we wrap up, so you're 2026, 27. So, what are you working on at the moment, if you can say?
Well, the big thing that happened in my life was I wrote a novel called GRQ, Stands for Get Rich Quick,
Okay.
a company out of the UK publishing company called Fly on the Wall Press published it, and we thought that it might do pretty well, but it did kind of exceptionally well. As I mentioned, won the American Writers Award, it won the Literary Titan Award,
Wow.
it won the Thriller Award, sold exceptionally well, and led to the commission of other novels and books that I'm working on. That in turn led, although it was actually preceded by, but the way the things played out, a film based on that book called GRQ, which is this comedy tragedy. The story is about a guy who invests in crypto. Never a good idea.
It fluctuates too much.
Where a lot of people, and he's losing everything, so he decides to put everything he's got into crypto. And then he decides the best way to make the most money is to get everyone in his family to put in crypto as well, and everyone he knows, so he can save his house and save his marriage and save everything else that's going on in his life. It doesn't turn out exactly as we would hope, although it does have a happy ending. It's kind of a comedy tragedy, and it came out very well. And that film comes out later this year.
Awesome.
I then was commissioned to write a couple of major screenplays of dramas. One very interesting about a Muslim family and a Jewish family whose children are swapped at birth, and they
Oh, wow.
discover this at 14, so they have to deal with this. It turned out to be very topical before a lot of this other stuff was going on. And then I'm some TV series that I'm working on as well. Then I've got a horror film called Until Dead in Georgia, which I'm working on, and then some lots of other things. So for some reason, my new phenomena is me as writer, and I am writing 4 or 5 things a year, and most of the major studios have got me engaged in one process or another. So that's the big thing that's happening right now. And then I've written some textbooks along the way. There's a book called Film Production I wrote many years ago, but there's a new book called The Book of 10, which is 10 lessons about cinematography, about directing, about producing, about leadership, about editing. And that's come out and is doing very well, in part because it's co-sponsored by a podcast I do with a guy named Vince Grimes called Filmmaker and Fans. And Vince is the former creative director at Google. And of course, I am who I am. And we talk to other filmmakers and to each other. And this book came out of the result of our conversations. And we ended up with 6 or 7 million people following the show, and that book's selling really well. And then I've got an Instagram page called Steve Bernstein, Director Writer, which has 120, 130,000 followers, again, where I do little segments each day based on the book, based on my life lessons, based on my experience, talking about leadership, about writing, about creative process. So that led in turn to a one-man show I'm doing, which is called Creative Differences, where it's 5 versions of me on stage at the same time, arguing with each other about whether I should be a cinematographer, a writer, a director, what creative process is, whether I should be doing comedies or dramas. And it's comic and it's dramatic, but it's a summation of a 50-year career. God, I'm old, in the film business, and
50
hundreds
years.
of movies and music videos and commercials. Yeah.
50 years. Wow. There you go. Stephen Bernstein, thank you, sir. And one final thing. For someone that wants to get into the cinematography game, what's one piece of advice that you would give that person today, knowing what you know now over 5 decades?
Don't buy a camera. Biggest mistake most people make is they think that the equipment is what's going to get them employed.
Yeah.
Always look at what's most difficult about the trade you're contemplating. Master that skill set, and everything else will follow. The hardest thing in cinematography is not camera operating, not lenses, not buying the camera, it's lighting. And if you become good at lighting, then everybody will want to employ you, whether you own a camera or not. If you can't light and you own a camera, they'll employ you once. and it's going to look like the interior of Tesco's or whatever it is before you learn to light. So if the hardest thing in cinematography is lighting, which it is, become a master of lighting, and then you can rent cameras from any variety of sources. That's the trick of anything. Same thing with directing. It's not putting together a great pitch deck to get your project made. If you're going to direct, make sure that you know how to direct actors and give them notes, and the notes are playable, and that you can direct actors to get them to be the best version of themselves. Then you need nothing else. Don't rely on technology to save you. Rely on skill sets to save you.
Awesome advice. And I have subscribed to your podcast, so I'm looking forward to listening to that as well, and also your Instagram page. I'll put all those links here in the show as well. So thank you, sir. It's been an absolute masterclass. We really do appreciate it coming on DMR. Have a great night, and we'll talk soon.
No, and make sure you send me those images of those whales. That sounds incredible.
Yes, sir. I'd love your feedback. Thank you, mate. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
So there you have it, an amazing hour, huge deep dive from none other than Stephen Bernstein. Thank you, sir. We really do appreciate you coming on DMR with all of your fantastic stories. And a reminder that DMR is part of the Audible Creators Program. So what does that mean for you, the listener or the viewer at home? Well, there's a link in my show. You can jump on that link. It will take you over to Audible, and you can start a 30-day free trial on behalf of DMR. That's right, 30 days for free. And two great options. Stephen Bernstein's podcast, which is Filmmaker and Fans, that he co-hosts with his colleague, which is Vince Grimes, is available on Audible, so you can sink your teeth into over 100 episodes there. I've subscribed recently, some brilliant content, good stuff from those two. Plus, you've also got an amazing title, which is called Sonny Boy. Now, I listened to this a few months ago, could not put it down. It's written and narrated by none other than Al Pacino. All about his life growing up in the game, trying to get into Hollywood, all these amazing films that he starred in. You won't be able to stop listening to that one. So you will be supporting DMR as well if you stick around past the 30 days. Terms and conditions do apply, but some amazing options on Audible there. So stay tuned. The DMR momentum is building. We're very busy canvassing at the moment for all the talent that's out there in Hollywood, discussing potential interviews with PR firms. So stick around. It's going to be a big 2026. We're pretty pumped. As per usual, laters on the Menjay.
You've just experienced DMR, the red carpet treatment. Now, get your ass to the movies.